Hi, and welcome to my project. This is a discussion regarding the recruiting, hiring, and maintaining of police officers in the United States. To begin, I would like to start with an introduction to the project. This project hits really close at home with me because I've always been really confident and strong in my beliefs when it comes to supporting the Blue and the police officers that protect us. My brother-in-law is a cop here in Saline County, and it's always been really important to me to speak on the behalf of law enforcement. I'm a criminal justice major here at Fort Hays State University. I would like to introduce the project and outline the ideas that are discussed throughout. Here I'd like to start with a quote from Wareham that was published in 2013. It says, "Law enforcement agencies invest substantial resources to recruit, hire, and train new police officers." I couldn't agree with this statement more. Police officers are so important to the day-to-day livelihoods of every single United States citizen. It's really important that we invest tax dollars into doing the right thing here for recruiting, hiring, and training officers, especially when it comes to them protecting us. I have another quote from Comier that was published in 2011. It says, "The last few decades have brought about a renaissance in the police hiring process, with the near universal use of civil service exams, physical agility exams, psychological testing, background investigations, and the burgeoning of assessment centers and use of elaborate means of assessment. Candidates now undergo a process far more sophisticated than that of prior decades." This quote was published in 2011. We've maintained the same pattern. The hiring process is really complex, and agencies try to do their best to make sure they're hiring the best people. That's not always beneficial. An introduction to the problem. Our first and foremost idea here that we would like to discuss is just the shortage of an applicant pool. Agencies across the nation are struggling to find people who are qualified that want to do this job. We're facing a high attrition rate as boomers are retiring. There are open positions across the nation as agencies begin to drown with overtime and turnover and burnout. To begin, I want to discuss recruiting and how we're recruiting in the past, how we're recruiting now, and what we're doing wrong. Historically, radio ads were ran, newspaper ads were ran. Before the internet, offices around the nation would still try to reach out to the community and advertise their openings. The need for that hasn't changed. Recruiting is huge. It's the number one step in the hiring process. Recruiting is the way that we find qualified applicants that are appealed to the position, that want to do this job. You can be qualified, but without the desire to do the job, you're going to fail. I've got two quotes here from Coper that were published historically in 2004. The first one says, "The supply of good police recruits was down throughout the nation during the summer of 2000. I feel as though that trend has been steadily maintained." The next quote says, "Negative publicity over such matters as racial profiling and the excessive use of force may have discouraged some people from wanting to join the profession." This is a topic that we will discuss deeper later on in the project, the relationship between law enforcement and the public and how that negatively has affected police offices across the nation. The next step after recruitment is the application process. I start with a quote from Go Law Enforcement here. It says, "Each police department has its own time frame and procedures, but generally it takes about 3 to 4 months for an applicant to be fully reviewed, checked, and a decision to be taken whether applications shall proceed with the hiring process or not." To begin, this is an extremely long amount of time. Anyone who's unemployed and is looking for employment does not want to wait 3 or 4 months just to have their application reviewed. The next quote here comes from Kane, which was published in 2020. It says, "Most police organizations have a multi-phase, multi-hurdle section process that includes a physical agility test, written examination, meeting with the panel, receiving a conditional offer, a background investigation, a polygraph examination. Then there are psychological fitness evaluations, a medical examination, and drug screening." These are all true, especially pertaining to Saline County. Those things are true. Pre-academy polygraph screening results are used to predict variance in cadet characteristics related to attrition and training performance. This was said by Park in 2013. Polygraph tests are still being used across the United States as an aspect of pre-employment in law enforcement agencies. There are a lot of disqualifiers that are occurring in the application process. Between all of the things listed in Kane's comment, an applicant can be disqualified at any time. The next step I'd like to talk about in the application and the hiring process is the judgment of character. I love you. When an interviewer has to sit down with an applicant, they can go over all the data, they can go over all the test scores, they can go over all the physical examination information. But the biggest thing that matters to me the most is data that's not tangible. The morality, the integrity, the honesty, the intention, the mental health status, and the ethical background of these cadets and recruits. I have a quote here from Kilifner. It says, ethics training for police officers prepares them to recognize ethical problems, identify moral choices to solve issues, and take action to accept responsibility. Mental health status is a huge thing when it comes to recruiting police officers. I believe that the other aspects, such as morality, integrity, and honesty, those things are hard to gauge. It's the interviewer's responsibility to take action and learn about these applicants. When it comes to mental health, police officers go through the worst. I've got a couple quotes here. The first one says, matters to do with mental health of police officers have risen in the political agenda in many Western liberal democracies. Mental health and cops is in the news all across the United States. Power-hungry, mentally ill, psychotic police officers, the 1 in a million officers, are making the news and destroying all good rapport across the United States. I have another quote here. It says, it's generally assumed that police officers, due to specific nature of their work, are at high risk for development of mental health problems. This couldn't be more true. I've seen it firsthand in my brother as he pulled the trigger and killed his first suspect in action. I watched him change in front of my eyes. The openness and the discussion of mental health needs to be talked about more in police office recruiting, hiring, and maintaining. Here we have a cut from the Saline County websites with the physical demands, the environmental demands, and the mental requirements of essential job function for a police officer. As we see here, we can read through all the physical demands, things that an officer would experience on a day-to-day basis. We can discuss the mental requirements, such as the basics of comprehension and following rules and regulations. Nothing on this page seems too out of the ordinary to me. The next step I'd like to discuss is training. I've got one quote here. Training is perhaps just as important as recruiting. After an officer is interviewed and brought on board and training before they go to their departments, they are in a state of themselves still. They haven't been, I want to say, corrupted by the culture that is police training. Here, in my quote, I have a saying that says, regarding the use of deadly force, headline cases have attracted a spotlight that has not yet wavered. In the aftermath of the 2014 deaths of Michael Brown and Eric Gardner in the U.S., result of police use of force research, which contributes to police training in this complex area, remains of interest to police organizations and the communities they serve. People are really interested in how training is related to poor officer performance in the field. It's under an extreme amount of scrutiny. Training needs to be a highlight. It needs to be talked about, it needs to be discussed, and it needs to be reworked to eliminate the culture of masculinity, which we will discuss later. Here I want to talk about maintaining officers. This can go hand in hand with our issues of recruiting. We see people retire, we see people leave the field, we see people quit, we see people die in the field. It makes recruiting that much harder. We have to fill these spots as the spots become open. I've got a quote here from Wareham that says, reducing officer turnover can save significant resources, yet little is known about the rates and patterns of turnovers in law enforcement. We know there's turnover. We see officers quitting. We see officers retiring. It's our responsibility to fill those spots with qualified applicants that are going to do well on behalf of the department. I have another quote from McCarthy saying, employee burnout can affect workers' health, motivation, and job performance, and speed staff turnover. This is totally true. An officer's health, an officer's motivation, an officer's job performance, that all revolves around their morale and how they're being maintained in the office. Burnout causes a lot of people to leave the field. Mental health, not talking about it, struggling with it, not being able to deal with it. People leave the field because they don't feel as though they're being taken care of by their department. Here I want to talk about applying my ideas of a problem solution. I want to highlight the issues such as the recruiting shortage that we've discussed, the poor training relationships between the community and the police and how that is all wrapped up, and how low morale can lead to high turnover and, in turn, back to the open positions that we're struggling to fill. To fix recruiting, I think our first big step is getting out there in the community. I've got a quote here from Hubbard that was published in 2019. It says, "To recruit and retain quality officers, organizations must adapt and adopt leadership practices more aligned with the needs and expectations of the incoming millennial generation." That's us. That's me. We have different needs than the people of the 90s and the 80s and even the 2000s had. The younger generation has different needs. They have different requirements that need to be met in order to be appeased or even reached. In terms of recruiting, we've got to recruit online. We have to get on social media. We have to change the relationship between the public and law enforcement. All the negative media coverage has degraded that relationship. Many years ago, little kids would look up into the face of cops and be in awe. They were in an honor to see a cop. That has majorly changed over the last 20 years. Things, music, media, culture, hating the cops has become very popular, whether you have a good reason to or not. I believe going out and fixing that, restoring the relationship between the community and law enforcement can really, in turn, help fix the recruiting. When people aren't afraid to go to work, they're not afraid to apply for that work. We have to recruit the new generation of kids. Next, I want to discuss training. I've got a quote here from Rowski and Workman Stark. This talks about the four cultural denominators that are destroying training. The idea of showing no weakness, the idea of showing strength and stamina, putting work first, and the dog-eat-dog world. The majority of us have never been to police training, but I know enough about it to know that I might not make it. Criminal justice is my life. Being a cop would be amazing, but the cultural setting of police training, the dog-eat-dog world, the show no weakness, the disregarding of mental health and personal problems and personal comfort, I'm not sure I could do it, and it leads to a lot of dropout, and it leads to a lot of poor performance. I believe that by doing away with these cultural bounds, that we can change training, and we can change how recruits come out of training. I also think that the curriculum within training needs to be discussed. Deadly use of force really needs to be a highlight. Use of force altogether. The discussion of mental health and the training of use of force needs to be a highlight. We have a quote from Rowski and Workman again, discussing interventions and how they can remedy negative effects of masculinity in training. Next, I want to discuss maintaining officers. Like I said earlier, changing that relationship between the public and officers can really just make things better all around. Like I said, when people want to go to work, going to work becomes much easier. Doing a job you love becomes much easier. I can't imagine going into work to do things for people who hated me, for an entire community that hated me, driving into a neighborhood that wanted me dead. I wouldn't want to do it. When we proactively change the relationship between the community and law enforcement, we're burning those bridges. We're getting rid of the hatred. We're getting rid of the negativity. We're encouraging officers to come to work. We're also encouraging recruits to apply, to fall back into this role of, honor and pride. I also think that there can be several incentive programs that become available. To begin, I think police officers need to be paid more. I think, benefits matter. Recruits aren't paying attention if there aren't benefits. The newer generation wants all those sweet things. And it is the law enforcement community's job to provide its employees with things that make them stay. And touching back with that trust. The public is what determines the feeling within the department. In conclusion, I think that benefiting all the ideas here can just overall decrease the crisis that we see today between recruiting, between training, between maintaining, just bettering the relationship, regaining the sense of respect towards the people behind the badge can change the state of America today. Here are my quotes. References, I guess. Thank you.